it's Leslie in Tennessee, and today we're going to talk about mixing up the growing medium for our raised beds. At the end of this video, I'm going to talk about how we mixed up the compost, but for now we're just going to show you the basic mixing of the materials. So what you're going to need is your coarse vermiculite, and you can see that this is quite coarse. Peat moss, compost, and today we're using forest floor that we're adding to it. So this will be 25% of the mix as well. Now you can do it without the forest floor. If you don't have it, just use a third of the vermiculite, a third peat moss, and a third of the compost. But we have the forest floor and we're going to go ahead and incorporate that. And if you need to know how to get the forest floor, then you can watch my video on how to harvest the forest floor. So we have a couple different options on how you're going to mix it up. You can mix this up just in a tarp, put equal amounts by volume, and just kind of stir it up or lift different ends up and let that mix, and then pick the tarp up and put it in your beds. You can mix it up in a tote, mix it up that way, and then pour it into your beds. If you have a wheelbarrow, you can mix it up in the wheelbarrow and then pour it into your beds that way. Or you can go directly into the beds. So I think I'm going to go ahead and mix some up on the tarp and show you so that it's more visible that way. The other thing is this mix with the vermiculite and the peat moss and the compost holds quite a bit of moisture, and it holds it well, but yet it also drains very well, especially in the raised bed. So that being said, that it holds a lot of water, if you are going to be using the raised bed anytime soon, after you put in a couple of inches of this mix, go ahead and water it well, and maybe even mix it a little bit with a garden rake to make sure that it's getting well mixed, because that vermiculite is like popcorn. It has all kinds of nooks and crannies, and it holds the water really well. And if you wait till you fill the bed up with 6 or 8 inches of this mix, it's going to be very difficult and take a long time to get the water to go all the way to the bottom. So if you're doing it like we are here in the fall, I'm not going to be using this bed until early next spring. So we're not going to bother with watering it today. We'll just let the rain and all that water it. And if we need to water it well in the spring, we'll water it, and we'll probably use a garden rake and rake it a little bit if need be. So let's get on with mixing up our mix. We're going to do equal amounts by volume. So I've got an equal volume of compost, I'm going to get an equal volume of our forest floor. Now our forest floor did have some debris in it. The prior owners on our property would dump trash and things out. So as we were going, we found a little bit of glass or other debris in our forest floor mix. So I am going to wear gloves as I mix this up. Another option would be to run it through a 1/4 inch hardware cloth or whatever that's called, that has the 1/4 inch holes, and just kind of sift it through. So that would be another option. I'm just going to leave these roots in here. It's just more organic matter. So we'll put that in here. I'm going to put in a bucket full of the vermiculite. I may have to pour this. Now let's see. Till we get a little bit lower here. To shop around on the course vermiculite because the price can vary by as much as $10 per bag. So if you're buying 4 bags, you could have a $40 difference there. I'm going to put that on there. And then on the peat, this comes very compact. So you don't want to measure it compacted. We want to fluff it up before we measure it. And you could actually dump this into a container if you wanted to and pre-fluff it all, which if you have a container or if you have an extra tarp and you want to do that, it would probably speed things up a little bit. But you do want to fluff before you measure. If you are concerned about using the peat moss, you can also use coconut coir, C-O-I-R. That can also be used. And again, you would fluff it or wet it to get it to expand. It expands quite a bit when it's wet. So that is another option that you could use instead of the peat. Okay, so that's about 4 of one to make all 4 of our ingredients in the mix. Now, like I said, you could have another person and just kind of mix it up by doing this. That would mix it up for you. Or if you have gloves and you're able to bend over, it's very lightweight. You can just mix it up by hand. So we have our bed here. In the past, we have used wood. It rots out really quickly, so we switched to the block, which has a landscape fabric in the bottom, which is good for about 10 years. We then we roll all the bricks back after we face the bed. After we roll them all back, lay out the plastic, and then put it underneath and roll them all back into place. And we cover the cinder that way, or the blocks that way. And then we're going to put our mix in. The first couple ones are the most challenging because the plastic kind of flops a little bit. Okay, so my concern is always that my plastic is up when I load this in. once you get your first few buckets in, you can use it to hold up the plastic. Just kind of sweep it in there. Just secure it up that way, and then the remaining ones will be relatively easy. Now the last option, which is the one that I generally do, I mix it right in the bed. One bucket at a time, mix it all up, and spread it out. That is by far the easiest and the quickest way. But if you're working with two people, it could be easier to do it this way because you can both be dumping on at the same time and then just mix all up at once and dump it in. And that's it. We'll show you it when we're all done. So we want to talk a little bit about compost that we mix into the growing medium for our raised beds. We grow or produce a lot of our own compost just with food scraps. We found somebody that has a stable that raises animals. We asked them if we could muck their stall. We got a bunch of old manure there. We harvest the leaves that fall and use that for the carbon part of the compost pile. And we basically do a slow compost process. We're not doing a whole lot of turning, although in the beginning I do turn it. Usually I forget about it, and then it takes about a year. So what we produce one year, we use the next. I'll talk a little bit about that on this pile in just a minute. But so here is, I have four piles here. This is a very old one. And on this bed, I put in a stick where I've marked down every time that I turned the pile. So this one is a year old. And so we'll be using up, I'll probably use up the rest of this today. This pile here, we just started this spring, so it's been maybe six months or so. We had a lot of green material that we put in here, as well as the chopped leaves that we had harvested the fall before. This pile heated up very quickly. We did go ahead and turn it one time, and it broke down very, very fast, and it's beautiful. So we'll go ahead and use this one. And I think the reason why this one heated up so quickly, the weather conditions were probably just right. And then again, we had a lot of green, and then the brown, which was the leaves. And so this pile went very, very fast. I'm just going to clear out. This is ready to go. And again, this is just basic food scraps from our kitchen. We eat a plant-based diet, so we have a lot of vegetable food scraps to put into our pile. And I've even been known to go to the grocery store and talk to the produce manager about coming in and getting the leftover produce that didn't sell or that went bad, and then you will put it in a big tote for me. You can also go to Starbucks or some of these other maybe breakfast places or coffee shops, and often they will give you their coffee grinds, used coffee grinds, and those are wonderful for the compost. Eggshells might be good. I don't have any of those. I don't use those, but that could probably be used. You just don't want to put meat in your compost, and you don't want to put any cat litter or dog droppings or anything like that in your compost pile. Then this little mound here was manure that we picked up from somebody. I was driving by their house, and I saw that they had a beautiful farm with animals that looked like they were well kept, in a barn that looked like it was well kept. And I stopped and talked to them and asked if I could muck their stalls. They were happy to let me go in and take manure. They even sent their children to help us load it in the truck. We got a truck full. And then we just unpiled that here, and this is what we have left of that. So we're also going to go ahead and put this in our mix. And then this is our newest pile that we're working on right now. Now, if you do not have a lot of green material to put into your compost pile or your compost bin, you can purchase alfalfa blocks. This is actually meant to be horse feed, I believe. And this is part of your green matter. So you can purchase this in a 50-pound bag, and you can throw it in with your brown material, your dried leaves or your shredded cardboard or whatever else you're putting in your pile, and then leave it like that. It's a good thing to keep your compost pile about the wetness of a wrung out sponge. So not sopping wet and not dry either. This is one that we're just kind of building right now, and I'm just going to let the rain wet it and let it go. But ideally, the moistness of that wrung out sponge will help it to decompose really nicely. And then, if all else fails, you can purchase compost. And I would suggest getting a quality compost. If something costs $2 a bag and they're calling it compost, it probably has a lot of forest products in it, such as ground up bark. It maybe has some sand thrown in there, and then it's got some manure of some sort or compost of some sort. So try to get a quality compost, and that might be a chicken manure, a cow manure, it might be mushroom compost. So see what your local nursery has that might work for you. If you are harvesting fresh manure, you've got to let it set, I want to say, for at least a year. Otherwise, it's way too strong and it's going to burn your roots on your plants. So make sure that it's old, and if you're mucking a stall, often you can push aside the fresh stuff, and if you scoop from the bottom, it's often very dry and compact, and you can use that as your compost. So when we're making our mix for our grow beds, it's very nice to be able to mix a variety of compost because they all have different nutrient strengths and weaknesses. So we're going to take our wheelbarrow, and we're going to, this pile here, of course, we're not going to touch. It's very unfinished. But these other piles, we're going to go ahead and make a mix of the really old pile, the current pile, what's left of this manure pile, and then this black cow. Now there is one other compost that I like to add to my compost mix, and I want to show you what that is. The other compost that I like to add to my general mix, just as my safety blanket, is a complete organic fertilizer, and the one that I use is a chicken litter based mix. I'll show you what it looks like. It's composted chicken litter, and this product is called Revita Pro. It comes in a 50-pound bag. It's by Ohio Earth Foods. See, why don't you come up real close and get a good thing of that? And it's a commercial blend actually, but it tells you how to use it in various applications. 5 pounds per 100 square feet. There's a commercial application, turf application. I buy this from a Mennonite greenhouse supplier in Elkton, Kentucky called Deerfield Supply. They have it at an excellent price, but it's 50 pounds. So if you have to pay to have it shipped, it might be a little pricey, but I get a 50-pound bag of this. let me see, in 2021, I think I paid $20 for a 50-pound bag, or right around there, for a 50-pound bag of this Revita Pro. And we have been using it for years and absolutely love this product. Complete organic fertilizer. All right, it's time to mix up some compost. So the goal when we are mixing up our mix will be 1/3, well, actually we have some forest floor. So we're gonna do about a quarter forest floor. And if you don't know what forest floor is, check out my YouTube video on harvesting forest floor. So we're gonna do about a quarter forest floor, a quarter coarse vermiculite, 1/4 peat moss after it's been fluffed up, and 1/4 a mix of compost. So we'll mix these together, and then we'll measure it out to equal 1/4. Now, one word about the coarse vermiculite. Let's come back and look at the coarse vermiculite. The coarse vermiculite comes in a 4 cubic foot bag, and make sure you get the coarse. The coarse will hold up for many years better than the medium or fine vermiculite. So this I get at a farm supply place that sells to growers and to people who own animals. All right, back to our compost. So this is a very old pile. And I'm not going to bore you with a ton of picking this up, but we'll do a little bit of that one, just for example here. I'll do some of this one. This pile just is totally amazing to me because, like I said, this was recently thrown on. It hasn't been all that long since we built this pile, maybe 6 or 7 months, and it just decomposed beautifully because it had such a good mix of the green and the carbon. And then I've got some of the animal manure from the stable. Now, some of this was so dry and compact when we got it that we had to let it set and wet it just to break it down. So we'll put in some of that. We'll mix in some of the purchased. And I'll mix in a few scoops here and there of the Revita Pro. Then I'll put my gloves on or use a hoe. I'll just do it with a shovel right now. And just mix these composts together. And I'll do probably 4 wheelbarrows equivalent of this kind of a mixture. So, and then we'll haul it down to the grow bed and we'll show you how we mix it all up. So we're down to about the last batch. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that into the bed so you can see us actually mixing it in the bed. So I have one batch of the forest floor, which, by the way, if you can use the forest floor, it really helps with your filler, because this other stuff is where your expense comes in the peat moss, in the vermiculite. So if you can stretch it a little bit by putting in some forest floor, that works great. So I put in my forest floor. I put in one peat moss. One vermiculite, and then one of our compost. I was telling my husband how the Lord provides. We needed a lot of compost for these two beds, and we weren't planning on making these two beds so early. We were going to wait till next spring, but the weather's so beautiful, and we were just ready to do it. And this was the fastest decomposting compost that we have ever done. So I'm just so thankful. The Lord is good. His timing is always perfect. All right, so I got a compost here. So I have everything in here. Now, if your back and your knees and the rest of your body work for you to do this, you can just get down and mix it right in the bed, which is how we did all of this. Put a pair of gloves on. It should be lightweight unless you have compost that's really wet. It should be light enough to just mix with your hands. Now, some people may say, why bother going through all this expense and all of this effort to make a raised bed like this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. We have a neighbor with a tractor who came by with his tractor to try to till up our yard that we could not do with our heavy rototiller because the ground was just too hard. This land has been abused in the years before us with a lot of trash, wire, glass, metal. A road came through here at one time, I was told, and the soil here was just pitiful. And I'm not so sure I wanted to have grown it in any way with all the trash and debris that was in it. So that's one reason. Another reason is all your expenses on the front end when you do this. And there's no weeds except for what may blow in. You don't have anything coming up from the ground. So you have less weeds. You don't need the heavy equipment to do something like this. You never use a rototiller in something like this. You always can just use your hands or little hand tools, and it would work just great. We're just going to smooth this out. This is going to be ready for early planting. This will just break up with my hands just like this next spring before the ground is really easy to be worked. If I was working in ground because it'd be too wet or something, this will be ready to plant in. Ready to plant early next spring. So there's that. All right, it took us probably 3 hours to fill both of these beds. And that's about it. Like I said, these beds will be ready early. Next February, I'll be able to plant in these, or March, depending on what time I want to plant. I want to say thank you to my husband. He's my cameraman. He does a lot of work behind the scenes that you don't see. And I'm thankful to be able to grow. It is a huge blessing, and I know that it would be a blessing to you just to be able to grow some of your own food. Even if you start with I won't say a 4x4. I don't like a 4x4. It's too hard to reach in. Even if you start with a 2 by 8 foot area, you would be amazed at how much you can grow. God bless you, and you were created to live in the garden.